Welcome to 60 Minutes of Unscripted.net. As doctors of .NET, we prescribe healthy choices in .NET. But if your real doctor had as little training as we do, you'd probably be dead. I'm your host, Cam Soper, with co-hosts Myra Wenzel and David Pine, and we'd like to welcome today's guest, Saamer Mansoor. Saamer, please introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I am Saamer Mansoor. Hi everyone. I'm Saamer Mansoor. I am a Xamarin developer. I've been doing Xamarin development for several years, dabbling in quite a bit of Xamarin Native and Xamarin Forms, and so I have a lot of experience with playing around with the SDKs of iOS and Android, and also doing a lot of testing with accessibility. So I would love to share my knowledge with you all today.
Well, and we're certainly excited to have you. You've been on the show before, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, last time, what did you share with us last time? Can you refresh our memory?
Yeah. So last time I was playing with mobile apps again, but I was trying to control things using a Raspberry Pi. So it's like controlling Raspberry Pi is using your phone.
Wasn't there a beverage involved, if I remember right?
Yes, kombucha.
I remember now. I remember. Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, certainly we're glad to have you back, and we're certainly glad to have an expert on accessibility, since this is our accessibility theme month here on .NET TV. So with that, let's dive into a checkup. All right, what do we have?
All right, yeah, so we have a new Learn module about creating accessible apps with Xamarin Forms. So perfect for this show today. So the new Learn module will go over some of the basics of accessibility and screen readers. So let's dive into that. How you can enable your system screen reader on iOS, iPhone, or even on Windows. And let's see if it's showing.
I just want to add real quick. I think with screen readers, it's a really interesting thing, because as a developer, it's not something that I typically think about. So I think it's great to raise awareness and be accessible. Mm-hmm. And like, are you all familiar with screen readers? Like, just in general, I'm kind of general question here to the group.
Yeah, I've played with them a little bit. Certainly, I've had occasions where like I can't actually see very well because like my pupils are dilated or whatever, and I actually turn it on to help me figure out like typical texting and stuff like that.
And are these screen readers, are they like a special thing, or is that like, how much different is that than like the read aloud that you get with like a browser extension?
I'm gonna punt to the audience on this one, because I have just used it ever so slightly, and of course I wasn't like a super expert in using them. I made it last an afternoon and it got me by, but I certainly don't have any deep experience with screen readers.
So I mean, the good thing is that today the first part of our talk is going to dive into exactly how to test stuff like this. So I'm going to get you all to also enable it on your phones. So even if you have an iPhone or an Android, everyone listening in the audience also, we're going to get, it's kind of like a workshop. We're going to actually enable these screen readers. You can say they have different names on iOS and Android on your phones. So
cool. So back to the Learn module, Myra.
Yeah, and so the Learn module shows how to enable on your phone, and I think like Saamer is gonna also show us that during the talk, and then talks about automation properties. I'm not a Xamarin programmer, so like I don't know much, but it has like some of the accessibility properties like help text and label by that will add the appropriate property for the screen reader to catch. And I have been, you asked David if we have some experience in screen readers for the .NET website. I kind of have to learn that. And so, but I've never done the testing on mobile. So I'm interested in seeing that as well. So yeah, you have some exercises here and you can check your knowledge as you go through the module. But I think we can get started with the talk and see what somebody has prepared for us.
Absolutely.
Myra,
Yeah,
one last thing. Could you show the user, could you show the viewers how we could get to that from the main page? So how do people search?
So I think we have an AKA. Did we put it on the screen?
We did, yes.
We did.
Okay. But if not, I think it should be under the learn. Let me go back. Sometimes my system gets a little bit low. So this is the one we want to create accessible apps with Xamarin Forms. But I think if you're using the catalog, you should be under the Xamarin development. So let's take a look. And you have tons of lessons in Microsoft Learn for you to learn .NET in an interactive way. So sometimes my streaming and sharing screen is not my friend here, so we'll see.
So
Well,
we
let's just. Yeah, I mean, we can dig through the search here.
Yeah,
but
we can.
I say let's just go ahead and jump into the hallway track and check out Saamer's presentation. All right, so Saamer, the floor is yours. I want to hear all about accessibility in Xamarin.
All right, everyone. This is exciting stuff. Let me just get my dongle. There we go. So, are you able to see my screen?
We certainly are.
Okay, perfect. So, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Saamer Mansoor. I introduced myself, and we're going to talk about accessibility today. So, a little bit about myself. I went to the University of Texas at Dallas. I did a lot of cool stuff. I've been doing Xamarin for several years. Participated in a lot of hackathons. I'm in Windsor, Ontario, which is close to Toronto. And so Toronto is where I started speaking and started sharing my knowledge. And most of my accessibility knowledge is because I worked on the My Spectrum app, and which is like, you guys might know of Comcast. They're Comcast's #1 competitor. They use Xamarin apps. And I think there's like laws that require accessibility on the apps. And so that's where I got to learn most of my iOS and Android accessibility knowledge. So we're just going to go really quick, breeze over parts of this video where we're basically showing how we open up the world to these other users. Because when we think about it, why do we call it accessibility? Essentially, people who we consider as disabled, the only reason they're considered disabled is because they are not able to do some things that we are able to do who are not disabled. And so if you make things accessible to them, all of a sudden they're not disabled anymore, So you open up so much to them, and you help enrich their lives in so many different ways. So this app over here is called Soundscape, where essentially
Hi, we are here today to
they
talk about the Microsoft Soundscape
created
app, which
a
is an application
map app that allows
anyone with low vision
people with
or
low
visual
vision
impairment to be able to have mobility and independence. And to help me do that,
Yeah.
I have Amos Miller.
So Amos Miller,
This is, hey, Saamer, I apologize. Oh, okay, you did. I was just going to say I having difficulty distinguishing your voice from Satya's voice.
yes, yes. No, we don't sound similar, but yeah, I wasn't going to speak over him. Basically, you know, and we're going to go a little bit over like the experience, and you know, I'll let Amos speak a little bit about what the app really does, and then you know we'll skip through it because it is quite long. But essentially, you guys are going to be able to see how like, you know, just a few minor things can really enrich a user's experience, and you know, all of a sudden they're not disabled anymore. They're equally able as everyone else.
Really give us a real demo of this application. Amos, do you want to describe Soundscape?
Soundscape is really cool, okay? Using a stereo headset, it lets a person who's blind or low vision hear where the landmarks are around them in 3D. And in this way, they can build a richer awareness of their surroundings and feel more independent and confident to explore the world beyond what they know.
It's pretty cool. Like it paints what's around you in sound.
That's exactly what it does. Shall we try it out?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, so you have the headset.
So really quick, you know, I don't know if any of you have had friends who were not able, who are low vision or who are visually impaired. But the thing with people who have low vision or visually impaired is that whenever they want to try to explore new places, they're not the most independent. But if it's a place that they have been to before, then they are independent. They can, you know, if they have a little bit of practice, they know, okay, what comes here, then what comes next? You know, where do I step down? Where the staircase, you know? Like how far is this how far is my office from the bus station? How many stops do I have to stop? So the first time they want to venture out to a place, it is difficult. But, you know, eventually, once they go like a second or a third time, they can be independent on their own. So this one, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make him independent from the first stop. So if I work in an office and I want to go to the restaurant, I don't need anyone's help to get to that restaurant, essentially. Does that kind of make sense?
So would it be fair to characterize, I think, the theme that I think I hear you coming back to over and over again is that accessibility is really about just leveling the playing field, right?
Exactly. And if you think about it, it's very similar to equality in terms of race, you know, equality in terms of gender. We're constantly trying to level the playing field for everyone.
Gotcha.
Yes, I have the headset.
And you'll start by pressing around me and just listen to where the landmarks are and tell me where you're hearing them.
Around you. Park 295 feet. Microsoft Building 34,
Wow, that's pretty
295 feet. Microsoft
Okay,
Building
it's all
33,
around the
265
landmarks.
feet.
Soundscape effectively
Around 160
takes
feet.
the same map that you have running on the phone and plays it in 3D sound. Isn't that cool?
That is so awesome. That's so awesome. So yeah, it just described everything around me, and I was able to sort of navigate, you know, and in this case, my gaze to all of those places.
And get your orientation. So I think, Satya, you need to make your way to building 34. Shall we do that?
So shall we try with this? Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
absolutely. With Soundscape, instead of turn-by-turn instructions, we will place an audio beacon on building 34 so we can hear where it is.
Got it.
Okay?
So this app knows how to rendezvous with that beacon.
Exactly. So
Okay.
we'll set the beacon.
Okay.
Okay, there's a button to
And
set
so
the
should
beacon.
I also do the same?
Yeah, do exactly the same. And
Yeah.
on the top of the list, you'll see building 34
Yeah.
access ramps.
I'll do
There's
that.
access ramp,
Beacon 285
Okay.
feet.
access ramp. And on your right ear, you'll start hearing a clicking sound.
Oh.
Can you hear that?
I got it. So it doesn't give you directions, but it kind of gives you the sound impulse.
Before you walk, hold on, you're walking already. Let's turn towards the way you're hearing the beacon.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's completely centered, and you hear a bell sound that tells you we are pointing at building 34. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we can't walk. There's the road on the way.
That's correct.
So let's walk along the road and find a place to turn right.
Okay.
All right, let's go. Straight on. You can hear the beacon on your right as we walk along here.
So I know that I'll have to at some point turn right.
That's right.
Marker. Amos's bus stop.
Good.
It says Amos's bus stop. So that's that. Basically telling me the beacon. This is your bus stop.
This is a bus stop that I placed with Soundscape. You can place a marker on anything you care about.
Yeah, but you guys get the understanding, isn't it? How like they're able to navigate through all of this.
Right. No, it's kind of like reminds me of echolocation, right?
Yes. Yes. Sort of. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly. And there's only 2 minutes left. Maybe we can, finish it off, and then we can
By all means.
Okay.
And it also, so it helps me personalize my mental map of the space, but also gives me a cue that we are getting close to the intersection because I know.
Correct, because you know that this beacon was there before.
So it's a landmark for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start cueing the dog to find a crossing.
Service road.
You might have received
the
in fact I got announcements.
Yeah.
Service road.
So
Goes
find the
right.
crossing. So you really work together with the app as well as the dog in this case.
Yeah.
Are you safe to cross?
Yes, we are.
Ever forward. And now,
Crossing.
as the beacon straightens up right in front of us, you should be able to hear the beacon right in front, which tells us that we are walking in a straight line towards our destination.
Yes.
Towards
it's
the ramp.
Yeah.
There's a crossing to our left.
Parking lot.
We're now entering a parking lot. The interesting thing about a parking lot, Satya, is that you have very little to work with when you navigate. So the beacon really plays an important role to help you keep orientation.
Orientation,
Yeah, this is very effective in open areas.
But the interesting thing here is this can be useful for anybody who's in a new space, even if you're fully sighted.
This is inclusive design in action.
Correct. Yeah, because as you said, you land up in a parking lot or you land up in a campus that you don't know anything about. And obviously in our campus, our buildings are not numbered in sequence.
So notice how he said one thing. He said inclusive design in action. So inclusive design in action is one of the most amazing parts about accessibility in general. So earlier, before there were a lot of these laws for accessibility, whenever you had a door for an office, you didn't have the button for being able to click that automatically open the door. You'd have to push the door or pull the door. You didn't have that thing. But now with the coronavirus, we're so like we don't want to touch the door, because we know everyone touches the door handle. So sometimes a lot of people, what they do is they use a key or something and they just click on the accessibility button. The wheelchair button, and it automatically opens the door. So like inclusive design in action can be seen in so many places where something that was initially designed for accessibility has been able to be useful for so many other people.
Yeah, agreed.
This is great inspiration, by the way. I think this is an awesome video, and I love whenever Satya comes on and showcases some sort of application in a real world setting, right? It's not just like the idea of it, it's actually functioning and you get to see how it works. And our good friend Code with Sean had mentioned that he really likes how you can tell where you're facing, when you're facing a certain point, and it's not just like a general sound overall, like you're not just near it. So I think that type of technology is amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, the amazing part is that we already have the technology. We just need people to implement this stuff.
Right.
And okay. So let me finish this off and then we'll get on to testing.
Good boy, Trevor. And we are at the access ramp.
That's right.
Good boy,
That's
Trevor.
awesome.
Boy.
That is really awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Amos. This is such a wonderful work. Where can people go get this app?
There are thousands of people out there enjoying the outdoors with Soundscape every day, and it's just wonderful to see that happening. People can get the app for free on the iOS App Store in the US, in the UK, in Australia, and we're working to get it to other countries as well.
It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. So just the basics of what we're going to go over. So the accessibility guidelines that mobile follows right now is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. So a lot of web developers out there may know of this already because it's a requirement for web developers. And unfortunately, we don't have an official mobile accessibility guidelines document yet. And I mean, it's a huge opportunity, I think. And like, I would highly recommend, some of the big actors to come together and potentially create these accessibility guidelines that they can follow. There are unofficial guidelines, and so we're kind of going to go over those today. Obviously, we one of the other things is that we're going to focus on people with low vision, but there's other things that is important to keep in mind as well. Like, for example, color blindness. There's 10% of men of certain races are colorblind, so have color blindness of some type. So color blindness is huge, and generally the way we see color blindness is like, oh, this color does not seem to look that good. It won't really look the best for people with proper vision. And generally, the thing to keep in mind is the contrast. So there are several contrast checkers, and it's very similar as web as well. So you can just Google something like AAA AAA contrast checker. So there's different standards for compliance, and something like this, you essentially put a color in the back of your background. So if you have a red background, so 00FFF, 0 RGB, yeah, and so essentially it fails the WCAG AAA standards, but it does pass the AA standard. So like that, there's that's essentially what is a good guideline for easy to read text. And then there's dynamic font sizing. So a lot of times older people, they will change the font on their phone so that it is large instead of just normal. And
it's not just older people.
Yeah, not just older people. Sorry. Yeah, but like my father, for example, he has it set to large, and until then, like, I never thought about that. Like, it didn't come to my mind. Even though I was a developer, I never thought about how like there are some people who actually change those default settings on your phone, and so like definitely you have to test your app so that when people change the font size, does the font go outside the display? Because you can't really swipe horizontally scroll a lot of times. So are users who change that setting able to see beyond what is in the screen? And then this one, like a lot of you might have already experienced, but at times there are these buttons like the information icon or question mark symbol that gives you more information, or just like a button itself, like the back button. What developers will do is that they will make the size really small, and they'll think that it's enough. But when you have different screen sizes, tapping on that specific button becomes really, really difficult. So there are different rules, like on iOS and Android. iOS, the requirement is 44 by 44 at least in terms of dimensions. And so you just had to make sure that you follow those guidelines. Minimum contrast ratio, we kind of talked about it, but it also applies for images that you display. And so just make sure that the images are easy to view. And then, the one that we're going to focus on today in more details is the screen reader part, where essentially every single phone can become a screen reader in itself. So we're going to focus on that a little bit.
We did have a guest ask about 2.1 of the WCAG. I'm not sure what the differences are in the 2.0, but
so I'm not 100% sure of the differences for mobile, but as far as I remember when I was implementing it, there are newer versions, but we were asked to follow 2.0 for mobile. So it's a very, very long document, and you have to go through the lines that basically pertain for mobile as well.
Okay, thank you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so we're going to go over Android a little bit. So how many of you have Android devices on you? Do you guys have Android?
iOS.
iOS.
Cam has.
Surface Duo.
Surface Duo.
Surface Duo phone?
Yeah, he's got it. He was a Windows Phone user. Don't ask.
Oh,
No.
I was a Windows Phone devotee.
Okay.
So am I enabling something on my Android device?
Yes. So
Yep.
on your Android device, let me just get my Android device displayed. So Visor.
And the checkup doc that we showed earlier has the instructions on enabling that on your Android and iPhone as well.
Yes,
Awesome. Good
yes.
call
And
out.
that's I highly recommend everyone to go and check that as well. But we're essentially going to go through that today. So you have what you can see over here is my Android device that will display just now. Oh, come on, Pixel. Yeah.
Wait for it.
But essentially, what you need to do is, if you don't have accessibility on your phone already, you would have to install the Android Accessibility Suite. And so the way that you know whether or not you have accessibility enabled is here's my Android device. So I just go to Settings, and if you notice over here at the bottom, it says Accessibility. So I go to Accessibility, and it already says Talkback over here. So you guys see that over there?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So Cam, did you say you have an Android?
I do. In fact, I can even share my screen. So let's do that. Why not? There we go.
Okay. Yeah.
Wait,
So
I need to add it to this. I need to add it, don't I? There we go.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do?
It's so cute.
Yeah, it's like the today's Bing picture thing. So what I'm gonna do is I am gonna go over here to I was already in Talkback. I was getting ahead of myself. I had gone over to settings is what I had done.
Yeah.
So let's go back over to just like the root of the settings app. And I think this is Android 10. I don't think the Surface Duo is on Android 11 yet. But I just went and just searched for it, right? So you can see right there in my history, Talkback.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you can either search for it or you can just go to Accessibility and Talkback and then just tap on it and then say, use service. So just tap on that. And then, it'll give you these instructions on how to use Talkback. And so we're essentially, I'm going to give permission and Talkback is activated.
Real quick question. So is Talkback the screen reader?
Yes,
Okay.
It is the inbuilt screen reader.
Got it.
Yeah, there's multiple versions of it, but Talkback is the industry standard. So if a vision impaired a person goes to school, where they're learning about, like how basically they're going to computer science school or IT, this is what they teach them.
Okay. I just love that, software engineers design or come up with names and, the industry standard is, it's a screen reader, but then we call it some custom app name like Talkback, which is something I'd expect my kids to do when I tell them to do chores.
Yes. Okay. So, Cam, have you enabled your Talkback?
I have, and I was actually just going through the little introduction here.
Okay,
and,
yeah, perfect.
And
So,
not quite getting the gestures right.
yeah, it can take maybe like a few minutes to get everything right. But let me move to the next screen. So for people who have an emulator instead, if they don't have a device, you can also enable Talkback on your emulator. So this is basically how you do it. You go to Device Manager, you edit your default Device Manager, and you add the Google Play Store icon over there. So generally, Google Play Store doesn't come with your emulator, so you just make sure the Google Play Store is there, and then just go ahead and follow the same instructions. So you might have to install the Android Accessibility Suite, and then enable Talkback. So now, the basic gestures. So as you can see, if it's your first time enabling Talkback on your phone, it'll give you this tutorial. But essentially, all you do is, if you want to go to the next item on the screen, because vision impaired users do not know what's on the screen, so in order to navigate, they swipe right. Let me increase my volume.
27% media seat control. 47% media seat control. Accessibility volume set to 80%.
Yeah, so essentially she speaks everything that you're doing. So I'm going to swipe right to move to the next item. So
navigate up button.
That's the
double tap to activate.
So this on the top left is the first thing that you have to that your Talkback points to whenever you're on your screen. So it always starts from there. And then when you swipe right again,
Lesson 1, basic navigation.
It will tell you, the title of what the page is. And so then, that's basically the setting, which is why it's very important and it's very difficult also to actually create your own programming framework. A lot of times there's like Flutter, React Native, Xamarin, Cordova, and all these other technologies, but getting accessibility right is very difficult if you're creating your own framework, which is one of the major advantages of using Xamarin, because we are using the native APIs and the native way of doing everything. So then I'm going to swipe right again.
Part 1, explore by touch.
Okay, so you guys know how to swipe to the next item. Swiping to the previous item is just swipe
Lesson
left.
1, basic navigation.
So I'm just swiping right.
Part 1, explore by touch.
And swiping
Lesson
left.
1, basic navigation.
So and then yeah.
I was just going to say that's kind of similar to like tabbing and then like shift tabbing for Windows users, like on like a desktop or like a web experience, right?
Yes, exactly. Especially on a web experience, that's exactly what it is. Like you're basically tabbing through the different items. And so I believe on web, when an accessible user is going through the different things, I believe the way to go to the next item is tab, and the way to go to the previous item is shift tab, I believe. And so it goes to the previous item. Don't quote me on that. But here's another thing.
Well,
yeah.
I just know we will quote you.
So, and so one thing to note is that people who are, who use this, they don't usually listen to it at the same speed as we do. It's usually on like super high speed, and so they like are able to discern things really quick, almost like their auditory skills are really, really strong. And then I'm just going to.
And I imagine it's something that gets easier with practice too.
Yeah.
Default.
Yeah. So like you can basically swipe up
Characters.
or swipe
Default.
down, and so it changes.
Characters.
What
Item 6. Item 5. Double tap to activate.
It'll
Capital
change
I.
what it
India.
announces, and then the way to select something is you just double tap. So you double tap anywhere on the screen. Oh, wait, I changed the settings. Sorry.
Words. Characters.
Default. Okay, now.
Item 4.
Oh,
Double tap to activate.
Double tap to activate. So double tap. I don't think there is a.
When enabled, the exercise is
Sorry.
completed and will continue
Next.
in a moment.
So double tap.
Next button. To activate the last item you heard, double tap anywhere.
Yeah.
Find
So
item
you saw
4 and
how
activate it now. After that, activate next to continue. Navigate up button.
So you just
Double
notice
tap
how
to
when I
activate.
double tap anywhere on the screen.
Lesson navigate up button. Double tap to activate.
This is being difficult
Next
on me.
button. Double tap to activate.
So if you double tap anywhere that's not like an active button or something.
So no, it shouldn't matter. Like you should be able to double tap anywhere. It's just being difficult with me right now. But essentially, whenever you're on a button, it'll say
Next button. Double tap to activate.
next button, double tap to activate. And so this is a very important point that I'm going to speak about in a little bit. But essentially, whenever you have a button, it will give you that option, and it'll actually announce it saying double tap to activate. So even on iOS, it's a very similar behavior. So what people generally do is that they will use a label and they will attach a click action to a label. So instead of making it a button, they'll attach a click action to a label. And so what happens is that it doesn't give you that announcement. And so that's a huge issue for accessible users. They have no idea what's going on in the app or what to tap anymore. Because as a sighted user, I'm able to see an underline of some kind. But as a non-sighted user, this is what usually helps me, saying double tap to activate, or button. It'll give me that sound. But and so these are like some important things to test as a user. So all of you out there, go out and test your apps that you're working on. Test your apps that you love a lot, and see what non-sighted users go through, and then either fix it or email the developers of the app and tell them, hey, here's an issue. This is how you fix it.
That's a really interesting point that you bring up, and I just want to call attention to the fact that since this is .NET and you're building, with Xamarin Forms and you're considering all the different platforms, there is an opportunity here. To be clear, you could use Roslyn analyzers, and you could, codify those rules into it to say that if there's labels that are touching accessibility stuff, and are being used as buttons, flag those as warnings, and then have like the compiler kind of help developers implicitly become more accessible.
Certainly. I think that's a very, very good point, because what I've noticed a lot as Xamarin developers, users do this very often. So instead of making stuff buttons, they'll make it a layout and then put a label that's clickable, just so that it'll be easier for them to make a fancy looking button.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say when you were showing that and the items were being read aloud, is that your app needs to be accessible in order for that to work. Otherwise, if you don't have the proper labels or you're not using the controls in a proper way, it's not going to read for people that have some kind of disability.
Yeah. And I mean, you can go ahead and do all of the stuff that you want as a developer, but, make sure that you test it and actually fix the underlying accessibility. So on iOS, for example, it'll be a trait. You can just add a button trait to that label, and it fixes things up. But iOS doesn't have, Android doesn't have that. So you'd have to, change the content description of that label. So very, very good point, Myra. Like, it's definitely like things that you have to keep in mind. And, it's okay if it doesn't work right now, but now is the time to, go ahead and fix it, or at least put it in your backlog so people are aware of it. And, when like, if it's not a high priority this sprint, make it a high priority next sprint,
Out of curiosity, you mentioned something else there that kind of struck me as another opportunity. With Xamarin Forms and like the discrepancies between different, target platforms, like, iOS versus Android, you had mentioned that iOS has it, but Android doesn't. Couldn't Xamarin Forms be used to like componentize some of these different things into like an accessible, friendly component package that's like, here's how you do buttons in Xamarin Forms, and regardless of where it's going, it's going to be accessible?
That's a very, very good question. And for a very long time, there were some features that were not available on Xamarin Forms as far as accessibility is concerned because of this, these discrepancies. But now there has been a much bigger focus on accessibility. There's a lot of really good articles that have just been published. And even there's something called the Xamarin Community Toolkit that essentially that gives you certain properties and functions that enable all these other functionalities. So it is very difficult. It is a huge challenge to encapsulate all the different circumstances. But we are getting to the right direction, and like we have made major strides.
Yeah, and I think we need to start incorporating like testing for accessibility as part of the regular process, right? Because like a lot of times we see accessibility being as an afterthought, and it needs to be part of your regular testing as well.
Yes, I totally agree. And the reason that we don't have testing as a regular is because people don't know how to do it,
Mhm.
And so that's why the first focus of this presentation was just testing it. Once you test it, you'll know what to Google. If you don't know what the bug is, you don't really know what to Google and fix. And generally, like I was really lucky. I'm really blessed that I was able to work with non-sighted users, like multiple of them, and they were like experts at this field, and so I learned from them, and that's why I feel like I have this responsibility to share it with other people as well.
And are you aware of any way to automate this test? Like for the website, we have some automated scans that they check for like if it has area labels or if it has like a enough contrast for certain things. Are you aware of anything for mobile testing?
Yes, for iOS there's a separate tool, and for Android there might be a separate tool, but also every time you publish your app as an internal testing app in the Android developer console, so they will tell you, hey, these are some warnings and these are some errors, make some changes here. Let me see.
And these checks like standard in Google Play?
So whenever you publish as in internal testing, it does these standard checks, and then whether or not you actually check it is your choice, basically. So let me show you. It's called a pre-launch report. So if you put in your so over here, notice how they haven't updated an app in the closed testing, but if you do put an app inside your closed testing, it just goes ahead and automatically does this free test for you, and it gives you all these details. But you need to put an app inside your internal testing. So you see that this company did not set up an app inside their internal testing, which is why I didn't run that. So let me see if they did it for this app. Pre-launch report overview. Yeah, see this one. It gives you this free report, and it says accessibility 16 unique issues, and so it gives you this low contrast. Remember how we talked about it? Touch target size. Remember how we talked about that one as well? And then we'll talk about content labeling in a bit, but essentially it gives you this. It kind of does this for you, but it's very basic. It's not the most useful. So it'll tell you like where the issue is, and then if you give your username and password, it'll actually sign in as well, and it will do some testing inside as well. So that's for Android.
Really cool.
See, low contrast. Notice how it is pretty low contrast. You see, and about that.
Huh.
Yeah.
I always love seeing the automation tools come together and like, in a way like this where you get to visualize it and see like it's highlighting individual elements. So it's very targeted. Like you can go as a developer, go address those issues, and it's very intuitive.
Certainly. Okay, so let's really quick. I just wanted to finish up with Android, and then we'll move on to iOS.
Just a time check for you, Saamer.
Yes.
We're at about 15 minutes.
Yes, I know. which is why I was like, let's finish this up. So up and then down will let you go to the first item. So I'm going to move this up, down.
Back button. Double tap to
Wait,
activate.
let's see.
Double tap and hold
So
to long
move
press.
to the first item on the screen. So right now we're at the bottom over here. So I'm going to move up then down.
Back button. Back button.
Okay.
Back button. Double item 5. Navigate
Ah,
up.
there we
button.
go.
Double tap
So
to
once you're on the
activate.
page, move up and
Double
down, and it
navigate
goes
up
to the top.
button.
These are more advanced things. You don't
Double
really
tap
need
to
to worry
activate.
about it.
Talkback.
But
Navigate
yeah,
up
see,
button.
double tap, and
Accessibility.
then accessibility, double tap. It goes home.
Settings.
Double tap. Okay,
Home
so
screen 1 of 2.
let's move on
Monday,
to
May 10.
there's other
Double tap to
you know
activate. Double tap and hold to
gestures
long
that they
press.
can also use. You know, you don't have to worry about these. These are just to make their lives easier. But let's move on to iOS. So you know, let's just do the iOS, and then I don't know if we'll have time to jump in further, but for Myra and Dave, did you guys want to get your iOS voiceover activated? So
Let's
just
do
go
it.
to settings, go to general accessibility. Everyone listening to, go to settings, general accessibility, and turn on your voiceover. Okay, so
Mine is on.
okay, so this is my screen over here. I'm going to go into my settings. And also, it is kind of difficult to test voiceover on your simulator. So you kind of need to have a device hooked up in order to test it. So you just go to accessibility, tap on voiceover, turn it on.
Speaking rate, 66%. Adjustable. Swipe up or down with one finger to adjust the value.
At some point, it goes from being useful to comical.
But
Well,
it's hard to use once you enable it. Like then you have to learn what are the gestures once you enable it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like,
which is the only learning curve is learning how to navigate it. And if you notice, it is not that difficult, you know? And then remember I told you that there is an accessibility inspector. So if you have Xcode installed, you just go to, you know, tap on that button, say open developer tool, accessibility inspector, select your device, and then it'll help you tell you what it is. You know, it'll help tell you, you know, what kind of label is used for it. So, you know, light bulb, image, you know, the trait is what really helps you out. And so on iOS, basic gestures is, again, you know, like I said, it is kind of similar. If you want to swipe.
sorry, we're all playing with the voiceover stuff now, trying to.
I'm gonna put this down, otherwise I'm not gonna pay attention.
So, I mean, you know, and you will realize why they introduced Talkback compared to the screen reader, because they wanted to be sort of unified with iOS as well, you know? And over here, you know, the gestures are very similar. If you want to go to the next item, you know, swipe right, swipe left to go to the previous item, double tap in order to open up, you know, the certain item, and then it'll announce utilities, you know, and then if you want to open an app, let's say settings, you know, I'm going to double tap on it and it actually opens it up. You see? So I can double tap anywhere on the screen, you know, even if it's over something else, it doesn't matter because now accessibility has taken over. So one thing that is important to note for developers on iOS and Android is the pull to refresh functionality. So it is generally a very important functionality in apps, especially if it's a news app, for example, you know, and the user is trying to get the latest update. So generally 3 buttons. So let's go to, I think the news app probably has it. Let's go here to the news app. And what should happen is that I don't want you to get my location details. Press X. Yeah, what should happen is when I pull with 3 buttons down, it should refresh the page, and it may not display, but it will tell you. It'll say, it'll say, pull to refresh, essentially. So, yeah, did you see that? It actually checks for news stories, and it actually does the refresh. And so, when you're making the app, that's one thing that you also have to note. Apart from like all the other things, make sure that it actually does these things. And then, if you have a carousel page where there's multiple items on the page, if you want to go to the next page, you just swipe with 3 fingers and it goes to the next. Swipe with 3 fingers and goes to the next page. So, you can, it's an easy way to swipe through instead of like having to go through each one of them. Xamarin Forms, there's Microsoft's own checklist for, what to make sure that you do when you're building your accessible apps, and you guys can search for it as well. But generally the gist is this: so you have to support font resizing. So if a user changes their setting to a large font size, the font in your app should not still be a small font size. They're by default, I believe that it does increase the font size dynamically, but you have to make sure about that. Make sure you have a good contrast ratio. Make sure that the UI makes sense. So, and then I think the other thing that's also important, which I kind of mentioned over here, is that your content should describe itself. So if you want to show an image, you can. There are 2 options that you have. You can either make it to where the image is not in the accessibility tree, so that accessible users do not hover over it. But if they do hover over it, you don't want them to hear image _ bulb _ light.png. That's not what you want them to hear. So you want to add a content description to that image. So it basically says, you have to have a good icons, and images have to have an alternate text description compared to just their title of their image name. And then you just make sure that the tree has accessibility in mind, and don't rely on audio or color cues alone. Captioning for videos, text for audios. We don't have much time, so I'm just going through this really quick. But these are just the basic ones. There's a lot of, like I said, more newer ones that are there in terms of properties for Xamarin Forms developers. The most important one I would say is accessibility tree and help text. If you can set these, these few items in your app, you can already do like 75% of the work. So, don't think that it's too complicated. It's out of this world to be able to do this. No, like you can do it. Just practice, playing around with it. It's intuitive, surprisingly. And you don't need to, go through like a whole course. Just watch this video over and understand it. And
so I get the feeling that it's kind of like thinking in terms of accessibility and using these properties is kind of like the same mind shift that happens when you're a UI developer on like PC apps, and you let go of the mouse and you're like, okay, can I do keyboard navigation? Right. Whenever you're doing an app like a mobile app like this, I kind of give them what you're saying is you should do, like you do the keyboard navigation on a PC, you should do the non-sighted navigation on your app to see if you can get through it.
Yes, certainly. I totally agree with you. And I mean, if you're a game developer, this is a great way to market it to a different audience, an audience that is often ignored. And you just have to do like a few hours more of work, and that's it, So there are drawbacks on, just the standard Xamarin Forms like capabilities right now. But I believe in Xamarin Forms 5.0 onwards, they have added some of these functionalities. Like earlier, if you got to a certain page, you like you wouldn't be able to focus on a text field, for example. When you open a form, you wouldn't be able to automatically get the focus to that text field in that form. And so you used to be able to do that on iOS and Android. And then also the properties that were there, they were messing up with automated UI tests. So that was another drawback. But like I said, Xamarin Forms is constantly working on it, and like there's always a workaround thanks to us using Xamarin Forms that have access to Xamarin native APIs. If you look at this, if you're using C# versus if you're using XAML, all you have to do is add this automation properties dot name. If it's an image, automation properties dot help text image. Same thing if you're using iOS. If you're using C#. Set is in accessibility tree false. So that the button is not clickable for whatever reason. And then I'm just going to go really quick towards the end. Like obviously I have like Xamarin native stuff as well, but I'm going to show you what YouTube does. So if you have a voiceover or talkback turned on, this thing on the right is what you see. So this screen is always going to be there. When a video is playing, these controls will always stay on the screen. They do not disappear. And you are able to, go 10 seconds previous or, forward or rewind by 10 seconds, basically functionality that you don't have, as a accessible user. So, you really have to go into detail and make sure that you have your apps working for both. So, just do a check. If the accessibility is on, then, show them this different display. Yeah. Did we want to, should I continue on with the rest of the stuff as well?
Yeah, no, by all means, you've got a couple of minutes to sum up your final thoughts here, and then we'll close out the show.
Okay, yeah, I will just go really quick through it. But essentially, Xamarin Android, like they're if you're using native Xamarin Android, you have the accessibility manager that you can use, just like native Android, using Java or Kotlin. It's the same thing. You just say accessibility, and then you send the accessibility event, and you send in whatever message you want in that event text, and then it will announce a certain thing. So if you tap on a button, you want it to show that it's doing something, like it's loading the page. If you're doing any custom code, you essentially will want to run a function that announces what is happening. Use the announce functionality, use the focus functionality, just pass in whatever view you want it to focus on. Again, like as I mentioned, whenever you have custom UI, you definitely want to test that a lot. So, we were using a custom calendar. When we tested it for accessibility, it was loaded with bugs. We had to call pest control in order to fix that. And then, content description, as I said, make sure that you add content descriptions to buttons like this, where it's like you don't want it to say next chevron, you definitely want to say next month button, and so users know what's going on over there. Just like that, important for accessibility, use that quite a bit.
So all these things that you're showing make me think, like, how do developers ensure that they're setting like the right contextual piece? Does it just go back to like automation and testing? Like you mentioned like next month in the context of that, like how would they know to say next month rather than like next or something more vague or, you know what I mean?
So you're right. That's a very good question. So we know that we want to say button at the end or image at the end. But what we want it to describe is up to us as a developer. So if it's a calendar, we want to say, okay, if you click on this button, it goes to the next month. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep.
So, Saamer, so in closing, do you have a slide with your GitHub or your Twitter, or you want to share any of that?
Yes, yes. So I have a lot of. So this is my slide with all my details. You can reach out to me on Twitter. I have several Git repositories with accessibility. I've done quite a bit of work. Sorry. Edit mode. Quite a bit of work with accessibility. So if you have any questions, reach out to me. Sometimes I also answer accessibility questions on Stack Overflow for Xamarin. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you, everyone, for. Well, first of all, let me reiterate. Thank you, Saamer, for coming on the show and sharing that information with us. I'm sorry we didn't get all the way through your presentation, but we've had you on the show a couple of times, and I'm sure we'd love to have you back. And thank you, everyone, for watching the .NET Docs show. Check out our show recordings, our upcoming topics, and more at .NETDocs.dev. And tune in next week when our guest will be Steve Gordon talking about Elasticsearch.net. Until next time.
Bye, friends.
Thank you.